And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of Paranormal Notebook. I am Dan. That is Drew. Our special guest tonight, returning to the podcast, James Szubski. I knew I was going to butcher it again, damn it. And I practiced all afternoon. Tell you a little bit about James. He's a former volunteer search and rescue EMT, wildland firefighter, mountain guide. James will discuss again with us the wide array of paranormal activity in and around the Columbia River Gorge, including the Click Itat 8-Cat, right? Did I say it right?
You got it.
Okay. That I can't even do that sober. Sasquatch, UFOs, portals, and small humanoids. You're a decorated U.S. Army infantry veteran. You earned a degree in communications from the Evergreen State College. He's enjoyed decades-long career in that field, working for companies like Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Dungeons and Dragons, and the Magic Gathering. He currently volunteers his time as the leader of the Click Itat Ape Cat research team. Now, I dare anybody to say that sober or drunk. He's got some book out called Arcane Adventure. Well, it's an Arcane Adventure Maps. It's listed under books. It's a full color guide to paranormal hotspots within the gorge. They're currently only available at your store, Margie's outdoor store. And is it Bingen?
Bingen, yeah.
Bingen, Washington. And I went to his website last year. I looked at it again today, and it's amazing. I'm going to click it up here real quick and take a look. They've got a sign when you pull up there. It says, file your paranormal reports here. The Click-a-Tat, Ape-Cat encounters, Sasquatch sightings, portals openings, temporal shifts, UFO contacts, ghost experiences, fey mischief, strange occurrences, etc. And do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster? And I'm sure James is like, if there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say, right?
There's some good evidence. That's all I'm going to say.
That's all I'm going to say. I tag in there, as everybody knows, it's from Ghostbusters. It is what it is. So, James, welcome back. I've been kind of watching you on and off up until I had the brain surgery and following stuff that's been going on out there. And, it's a lot of it gets really interesting. And I asked you to fill us in on some of the new things that have happened to you in the last year and recently. I think he's got a little bit of a lag going on, but we can't see you, but keep talking. We can hear you.
Yeah. That's strange. My screen just blanked out.
It's paranormal, man. You're on the Paranormal Notebook.
Not according to the title, and I was looking at that just a second ago. It popped up on my screen. We went live, and it's like the ParaNormal Not Book.
Yeah.
Did it say Not Book?
Yeah, it says Not Book.
Well, it is a not book. It's paranormal video.
Just issue, no problem.
See what I did there? All right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll ask you right off the back. Michelle tries to give me some updated talking points. Something about you experienced a spatial and temporal displacement while you were exploring an area called Broke Leg Barrows.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me back on the show. First of all, it's great to see you guys again.
No worries. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, James.
Happy. Yeah. And so, for your listeners who didn't catch my first interview, I operate a outdoor store in the Columbia River Gorge, and the Columbia River forms the southern border of Washington State, and our neighbors to the south is Oregon. We're about an hour east of Portland, right up the Columbia River Gorge. And the gorge has been a paranormal hotspot for decades and decades. Tons of UFO sightings, tons of Bigfoot sightings. In fact, Washington State has got the largest or highest number of Bigfoot sightings per capita of any other state in the country, and the highest number of UFO sightings. And the Columbia River Gorge is the hotspot of Washington State. So we really over-index here for all kinds of strange things. You read that list off my sign in the window, and we get reports on all those things and even stranger things than that. And so the gorge itself is about 80 miles long. It is stunningly beautiful. You can go from the Columbia River at sea level just about to well over 3,000 feet in less than half a mile. The western half of the gorge, we're located in the Cascade Mountains. So the western half is like a classic brooding, beautiful Pacific Northwest rainforest. And then the eastern half is a high plains desert. Those mountains form a rain shadow. And so we have this incredibly varied set of biomes and climate out here. My home is sort of on the west side of the mountains. Stores are on the east side, and I drive through the gorge every morning, and it just blows me away. We've got over 90 named waterfalls out here. Some of them are over 600 feet tall. There are mountains that are perpetually clad by glaciers, volcanic stratovolcanoes. There's over 600 caves. People whitewater raft and windsurf and mountain climb and rock climb and hike and pretty much do all the cool adventure things out here. And yet we've got this incredibly large number of paranormal reports, and it spans from UFOs to Bigfoot to cryptids to ghosts to glowing orbs, you name it. Some of the theories behind that have to do with the really unique electromagnetic environment we have. We talked about it a little in the last interview, but because of the way that lava flowed through here millions of years ago, and the river's been flowing here for millions more years, and then the mountains rose up, it created a really unique electromagnetic environment. When you look at the government navigation maps of the river, they all warn in bright pink letters that compass readings will be off down here. And we've got some theories that it's that magnetic fields that are shifting people's perceptions so that they are perceiving things that you don't normally see in everyday life. I think the best. Go on.
I said, yeah, that's understandable. I mean, what is the Broke Lake Barrows? That's like a couple thousand years old, right? Isn't it like the size of Manhattan or something like that?
Yeah. So
I know a little bit about that because I heard it on a different broadcast with some people talking about it.
Yeah. So Broke Lake Barrows is about 7 miles north of the river. It is an area approximately 22 square miles in area. It's about the same size as the island of Manhattan. And just so your listeners have a sense of scope and scale, I think like 1.3 million people live on Manhattan Island. Mm-hmm. So the carrying capacity of a piece of land that large is pretty significant, but it is completely devoid of human life. So about 8,000 years ago, this cinder cone came up, the volcanic cinder cone, and it started spilling lava into a mountain valley. And you have to understand that it sort of comes up and it hardens on the top, and that forms an insulating layer. So then lava flows underneath, and we get a kind of cave out here called a lava tube. Basically, imagine like the lava's flowing in an insulated rock tube, and then the lava all flows out of it, and what's left behind is the empty tube. And so that's happening out here. And then over time, those tubes collapse and they form trenches and all kinds of crazy rock formations. And so when you go out to Broke Lake Barrows, I had heard, we've been down here for 3 years. My mother-in-law passed away, and my wife and I inherited her business. And that's how all of this really interesting stuff started happening for us. And I had heard that there was a 4-wheel drive track that scratched into a tiny portion of this thing. And so for months, I was driving around the perimeter of it in my sort of souped up 4x4 that we use for paranormal investigations. And I finally found an entry into it. And the reason for this road is pretty mysterious. There are no commercial activities that you can do. You can't really harvest timber in there because it's such rugged terrain. There's no minerals to extract. And so what this road is doing there is kind of a mystery. And you drive in there, and the first thing that you notice is that it's utterly silent. And the reason for that is that they've got all these rocks, and some of them are still very sharp. It's sort of like, in Lord of the Rings, when the dwarf Gimli is explaining that they have to travel through Amon Wheel, and he describes it as an impassable labyrinth of razor sharp rocks. Well, that's pretty much exactly what we're talking about here. And there are some forests out there, but it's a hard living for these trees. And so they don't grow to the full size that you see, but they're covered with, like hanging moss, and the rocks are covered in many places with moss. Some areas have been hit by lightning and all the trees have burned down, and it looks like you're just driving through a moonscape. And compasses have been proven to be completely unreliable in this area. Cell phones don't work. I've had my drone out there, and it always has trouble acquiring satellites when we're out there. And I was out there flying my drone, and I had a spatial and temporal displacement experience, which really kind of was astonishing to me. And, before I get into the details of that experience, I need to provide a little bit of context about, my experience navigating why this was such a unusual experience for me. And then a little bit about this area we call Broke Leg Barrows. So we've had numerous reports about this area. We've had Sasquatch sightings in the area. People have seen Sasquatch footprints in this area. And so there's a lot of already strange things that are going on. We don't have a lot of UFO reports from people who are actually in Broke Leg Barrows. The area surrounding it, we have many, many reports. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, a woman and 8 of her friends were lying in a field in a little town called Mill A. And they were watching meteorites and shooting stars, that kind of thing. This was September of 2003. And they saw 2 what looked like satellites sort of tracking across the sky. We get a lot of reports. Sometimes people see the Starlink satellites and they think that they're seeing UFOs. And it's always a little bit sad to me because I never want to, tell someone that their UFO experience was an Elon Musk experience.
You don't want to burst their bubble. Yeah.
And so I was hoping that wasn't the kind of story that she was telling. And then it took a turn that I had not foreseen coming. She said, these 2 satellites, and for your listeners who haven't seen satellites, they just look like 2 actually like stars, 2 pinpoints of light crossing across the sky at a speed that's, slower than a meteorite, but faster than a plane. And she said, and when they got right over us, this green sheet-like laser shot out of it, and it scanned the forest line and then all the way across the field, scanned the 9 people, past them, hit the rest of the field, and up the other side of the forest on the far side of the field. And they were all super excited about it. And she was the one who came in and filed the report. What's interesting to me is that this is a co-witnessed event, and every one of them, had the same experience. And so that's the kind of activity that's common around Broke Leg Barrows. There's also been a number of cases where there have been people have gone missing and in Broke Leg Barrows. So the local hunters don't hunt in there. They just refuse to go in the area. No one in their right mind spends any time in there because you can get turned around so fast, and it's physically dangerous because there are hidden canyons and cave-like structures with very thin roofs, and all kinds of stuff is going on out there. Well, we've had at least 4 people who've gone missing. One of them was a case in 2014, I believe, a guy named Chris Zitzowitz. He was out there looking for caves with his hiking buddy, and they got separated only by about 20 yards. So, easy shouting distance, easy visual distance. And then Chris disappeared. He vanished and was never seen again. No trace of the guy. Like, not a Snickers wrapper, not a bootlace, not a shred of clothing, not a footprint, nothing. And so he went missing, and they immediately started a search and rescue effort. And I've been on many search and rescue efforts myself. I knew exactly, how this would have gone down.
Yeah.
And I've talked to folks who are part of that mission, and they had hundreds of searchers. They had choppers, they had dogs, and no sign of him. It got to the point where the sheriff's department down in Skamania County started wondering if his hiking partner was a suspect. Like, was there some kind of foul play? And he wound up passing numerous truth tests, verification. The cops have ways of checking on your stories and ensuring that you're telling the truth. And he came back 100% clear. One of the really curious things about this particular story is that the U.S. military deployed boots on the ground during this search. Now, I have been on dozens and dozens of search and rescue missions, and the only time we ever see the military is when, like, the Coast Guard's going to bring a chopper, right? But we never, ever see boots on the ground. And the idea, and some of the stories that I've heard in the store and the people who have contacted me about it say that, it was really highly unusual. And there was the stories that the soldiers were telling. Apparently they were a part of an elite unit. Don't really seem to match up. Like, we were in the area and we heard you guys needed help, so we just decided to show up and see what we could do.
Yeah,
that's not the way the military deploys its forces. Right?
No, that's not. No.
So
it's probably it's supposition here to the listeners. I've heard other things like this, and I've talked to when we've had Dr. Lynch on and a few other people who are into the the alien end of this. And you had just said, there've been some reports out and around in areas and things. And it's like, that's when they come, boots on the ground, they become very interested. And it's like, so what are they thinking? What are they looking for? And you just described a road, that goes into this area. And what is that doing there?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, because there's a pretty curious thing that I found out there.
My brain.
So this Chris Zitzowitz, true mystery. Like, the dude vanished, and he got separated by 20 yards and then nothing. Like,
nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. And it's remarkable because, those search and rescue dogs, they can find human remains, buried, in the ground. Like, it's, so the fact that he's gone, I mean, sure, there could be explanations for it. And, there's quite possible it's just a mundane missing person with absolutely no clues at all as to what happened to him. But there's a really strange set of circumstances around it. And the area itself has got high strangeness plastered all over it.
Right.
In fact, every spring, a little area just northeast of Broke Leg Burrows, the forest turns into a lake. And you've probably seen video of, like, places where people can go scuba diving in a forest.
Yeah.
Well, basically, that's kind of like what it is up there. And how that pond fills is a known fact. The snow melts, and that's just that water has to go somewhere. Well, what's strange is that every year in a single day, that lake then disappears, and no one knows where the water goes. Like, the lake fills up, everyone can understand, yep, the snow is melting, and then a single day, the entire lake goes away. And it's a lake that's like 3/4 of a mile in circumference. Like, it's a pretty big body of water. There are some theories that there is a system of underground caverns under Broke Leg Burrows, and some type of ice dam forms down there. And then one day that ice dam breaks and the whole river or the whole lake drains out.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, nobody has any idea exactly what's going on there. No one's ever found this.
It's a good scientific, proposition or theory, but you can't prove it. Yeah.
And there has to be some explanation for it.
Right.
But clearly it's something that we can't see. And I think there are the number of mysteries going on underneath Broke Leg Burrows. It's probably pretty significant. So, I had mentioned that there's this 4-wheel drive track that goes out there, and basically it scratches into the southeastern corner of this thing, goes in about 1/4 of a mile, and then it sort of dead ends at these strange standing bodies of water. Like, there are these volcanic depressions or
Yeah.
like crevasses, sort of like that fill up with water. And the water is always there. I've never been a time when I've been out there where there isn't water, like this whole series of really strange and mysterious pools. And, I was out there. My kids and I go out there, I have a high suspicion that there is some activity going out there. And it's my experience in land navigation and search and rescue tells me that this is not a place you want to spend a lot of time. But I'm telling you, I really think that there's mysteries to uncover there. So I was looking around and there's a campfire near these pools, and I was poking around at the ground, and there are spent 5.56 NATO bullet casings on the ground. Now, that in and of itself, it's explainable. We've got a lot of guys with AR-15s, and they fire. Many of them will fire NATO 5.56 rounds. When I was a soldier, those are the kinds of bullets that we used, kinds of cartridges that we used. And so it could be that it's just some good old boys. Interestingly, from what I could tell, and these casings are old, but it looked like they're firing in all directions. Again, could be some yahoos out there having fun. The thing that caught my attention, though, was that I found bullet linkage. 5.56 caliber is the kind that that you'd use in an M16, but it's also the kind of bullet used in a squad automatic weapon, an M249. When I was an infantry soldier, I was an automatic gunner, so I'm very familiar with this weapon system. And basically, it's got all of its bullets come out of a drum, and it's belt fed. And there are these metal links that hold the bullets together.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in and among these 5.56 rounds, I found some of those machine gun belt links. And the thing about that is that there is no civilian who is allowed to own a belt-fed machine gun in the United States of America.
No.
So again, I don't know what happened here or what's going on, but it looked like there was some type of military presence at this location. They were firing belt-fed 5.56 NATO machine guns, and it appeared that they were firing in all directions. Again, I have no data on that to go any further, other than one of the big question marks about what's going on in this place. I think there's more than meets the eye.
Yeah, that's damn suspicious. I thought I remember you talking about that last time you were on a little bit, and some of the other stuff that was going on in that area. You, of course, being in the military, and other people who will hear this later or listening. It's not too far of a stretch to think that, maybe there's, let's say that they're training out in the area and we don't need to know, and they're out there when not a lot of people are around. But you would think in an area, as you said, it's kind of an open area, more or less, that you could stumble in there and you could stumble across them. I don't know. It just seems really strange.
Yeah.
And, having those pools of water, and I don't know, I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but some of it just smells fishy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And again, all I'm trying to do is,
you're just offering up. Yeah.
Painting a picture for your listeners that this is a strange place where strange things happen.
Right.
Now, we talked about my military experience, and this becomes relevant. So since I was 19 years old, I've been a professional land navigator. So in the military, land navigation is, when you got a map and a compass, and you have to trek out and, find your objectives, or in search and rescue, we do land navigation to find lost people, or, find efficient routes out of where they've been lost from, stuff like that. And so for decades and decades and decades, I am extremely well trained. I've been trained by 3 different professional organizations on how to do correct land navigation. And even within my units, I was always recognized as one of the better navigators. Some people just have a natural directional sense. And so when you're out there and you're in the wilderness, and you're doing it at a professional level, there's a number of things that you're always doing. Like you're building a mental map of the area. you're keeping your pace count down, you're marking landmarks, you are, paying attention to what azimuth you're walking on. And, there's a whole set of things, you're keeping a track of where the sun is. Like there's a bunch of things that you're doing. They're always sort of background processing. And so it is, and I'm not telling you this to brag, but it's important that you understand the context that I cannot remember the last time I've been lost in a wilderness setting, and I've navigated in deserts and jungles and, forests and
no, James, that's good. That means your training and your expertise is paid off, man. There's no bragging. Yeah.
And the other thing is that if I've been somewhere before, I know it. Like it's part of the package, as you're identifying all these different features and landmarks and everything else. So I was out at Broke Leg Barrows, and this was not in the area where the 4-wheel drive track is. There's a road that sort of skirts around the outside of this thing. And I was, I'd parked my rig and wandered into the lava bed itself, probably 200 yards, right? And I got to, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to say it's a north-south trench, right? So there's this, probably an old lava tube that had collapsed. And so jagged and broken rocks all along the way, really interesting. And I flew my drone up and down this north-south trench several times, right? And I was, just trying to film it and, and that's when I was having difficulty acquiring GPS and all that other kind of stuff. But I could look over to my side and still see my car, so I wasn't too worried about it. And eventually, I had gotten up to the north end of this trench, and I flew the drone to the south end. The drone hit a tree, and it fell to the ground, so I had to go down there and get it. Grabbed the drone and picked it up, and then went to the north end of the trench. All right. Then I took a 90-degree left-hand turn. So now I'm facing west, right? And I walk another 200 yards west. All right. So this is like, imagine a big L shape. And I am now, if I'm at the bottom of the L and I go to the corner of the L and I go to the top of the L. And so I should be now probably 400 yards away from my car, right? Because I'd walked in 200 yards and then another 200 yards deeper in. And I found another really cool trench. And I thought, I'm going to fly my drone up and down this trench and, get some footage of this thing. And I'm flying the drone and I'm getting this sort of weird sensation. And I look over my right shoulder and I see my car. I see my rig over there. And I was like, what the heck am I looking at? And then slowly I started coming back to my senses. It was almost like waking up from a dream. And I realized that I was at the south end of the first trench. So I had been displaced approximately 300 yards, and my azimuth, or my compass heading, was about 110 degrees off of the way that I thought it was. And I had absolutely no idea how I got there.
Yeah.
You have to understand, like, for a guy like me, like, I'm the kind of person that you call when someone else is lost in the woods. And to be sitting there and flying my drone up and down a spot that I had already flown the drone, I had already been and already spent time in, checking it out, setting up my landmarks and everything. And to find that I had been basically returned back to my start point with absolutely no knowledge of how I'd been there. And the fact that I was in a place that I'd already been and I did not recognize it, it totally blew my mind. Like, it was really unsettling at first. I thought, wow, what the hell just happened to me? I've never had an experience like this in 30 years of land navigation.
Yeah, it's like it's like a weird shift. That's weird.
Yeah, and
man, that's strange.
So my emotions were at first like, what the hell? Like, this is kind of crazy. Then there's a little bit of excitement. It's like, I've been talking to people. We've had now over 300 reports in the store. And so, I talked to a lot of different folks. Some people have talked to me about their spatial displacement experiences, time displacement experiences, other things like that. And now here I was actually having one in real time. And, the thought that occurred to me like you could easily hide a whole Ewok village of Sasquatches here in Broke Lake Barrows. I mean, the place is vast, right?
Right.
And I don't know if those things are living in there or what is living in there. But if they didn't want me to go deeper into the area, deeper into that protected area, this was probably the most benevolent way to sort of put me back at start and prevent me from going in any deeper. If you think about it, like they could have tried to scare the crap out of me. They could have physically attacked me, but instead they just found this way where they seamlessly edited my memory and put me back at the starting point, sort of bumped me out of the zone.
And then the question begs, who are they? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
That's the question. Who's they?
To be 100% clear, like all that is speculation, like
of course it is.
But a really remarkable experience. And to have it firsthand, like you hear stories of people saying, oh, like we got spatially displaced or we had time loss and things like that. And you wonder to yourself, well, what does that feel like? What is that like? And I will tell you, like the moment when I began to realize where I was, it was like waking up from a dream. It was this most unsettling feeling of like, oh, wow. Imagine like there you had a coworker and you knew what they looked like. And then you were in a conversation and you're talking to somebody. And then you realized, oh my God, this is my coworker. Like 5 minutes into the conversation, you realize that you're talking to somebody that you already knew. Like that's the level of what the hellery that I experienced in that moment.
Yeah. And I got a 2-hour window of missing time that I talked about before.
Oh, really?
When we had a guest time. Yeah. Driving from Detroit to Kalamazoo, and my wife's like, hey, it's been over 4 hours. Where the hell have you been? And I don't even remember. I remember leaving Detroit, and I remember getting on, the route that takes you around Lansing, and I was headed into Lansing. I don't remember anything after that, other than I'm now pulling on, 94 into Portage, Michigan, which is right where I live. So I like you, I felt like I was in a dream. I was a little frightened to the fact that if I blacked out or whatever was going on, I could have killed or hit somebody, but apparently I didn't. So, somewhere between that time, I showed up here in my car. It's like, what the hell? Is that?
It's really curious. What? I'm sorry, Dan. I gotta say something before I forget about it. It's really curious what James is talking about. Now, I'm gonna ask you, James, to hypothesize for a moment. Would you believe this to be a technology or something that Karen developed, or something otherworldly?
My sense is, we had talked about the military presence during some of these searches. We've had many folks out. Well, when I say many, probably at least 10 stories. Folks who have come into the store and said, we were hiking in this area X and soldiers showed up and told us we needed to leave. Or dudes in a black Suburban wearing suits rolled up on a dirt road and told us we needed to leave.
Okay. Wow.
Or there have been areas where, the government has just closed certain wilderness areas, like people who go up there and, go panning for gold or rock hounding. They find a really cool spot and then they'll go back in a month and it will be closed by the government. There'll be signs all over the place saying, do not enter. And typically those are, they got trail cams. And so they're watching it and stuff like that. And so we've had numerous stories like that we've heard in the store of government activity. And, there's of course rumors that when Mount St. Helens erupted, which is just 35 miles from our store, that there was a whole government camp dedicated to, triaging and dealing with Sasquatches that were injured in that geologic event.
I'd heard this. Yeah, I'd heard about that.
I've heard that too. It's really
Yeah.
ironic too, because I was looking into the Mount St. Helens explosion earlier today.
Yeah. And
Crazy.
so the government has been intensely interested in this area for a long, long time. And, on a strategic level, it makes sense. It's one of the most important navigable waterways on the West Coast. There are 14 hydroelectric dams out here generating 44% of our hydroelectric power. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, everyone has got a server farm out here because of the proximity to the electrical power. And so this is a strategically very important area. Like, there's critical infrastructure here that during, the military has a huge interest in protecting.
Yeah.
But there's also all of this strange activity that goes on out here that seems to be somehow related. And so your question is, do I think this is terrestrial or something else? I'll be honest with you, I think it's something else. And I think the government is here trying to figure it out or understand it better. Their presence here is, they probably know more than we know, but they probably don't know it all. And that's why they have such an intense interest in the area.
Well, I'm sorry. The reason I asked the question is when you started telling the story, and you got to the part where you were, 400 yards away from your starting point, and then you look back over your shoulder and you see your rig sitting there. The first thing, and excuse me, everybody, if you're not Trekkie, but the first thing I thought of was an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation from way back in like 89 or something like that, where they had encountered an alien race that didn't want the humans to know about them, and Data had altered the ship's log and put a chemical through the ventilation system to wipe everybody's memory, and then took the ship right back to where they were at before they encountered this race.
Yeah,
And it's like, huh, it sounds like that whole displacement deal that Data did. And the reason I asked if you thought it was terrestrial or otherworldly was because they couldn't figure out why he had to keep doing it again and again and again. And finally, at the end of it, Picard made the remark about the one thing that humans love is a good mystery.
Yep.
So when this happens or this happens and we see this, but we don't remember it happening, we're going to go back and retrace our steps, and we're going to figure out, okay, how did I get this scratch? I don't remember hitting anything. Or, how did this bone get broke? I don't remember, falling or anything. So that's the reason I asked, did you think it was terror? Because humans would know the one that humans love is a good mystery.
It's true.
So,
you're so right about that. What an interesting idea.
The other part too is, what if it's a manifestation of unknown, how do I want it? Supernormal activity. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say supernatural. Let's say it is a portal. Let's say there's some odd things going out there because, if you're, let's back up to Tesla, and we can connect Tesla to maybe some of the things that are going on out there, at the Barrow, which basically everything is frequency, vibration, and energy. And if you're gonna formulate yourself along those lines, which we all should, he himself said there were a lot of unexplained things, in the universe that he was drawing from. In fact, there's hints that he was getting ready to uncover something of great importance that connected all of us to mysteries, of the universe. And I don't know that I ever was a believer in portals, but if you look at recorded history around the world, there's certain areas that seem to have these same things that you're experiencing there. And if not, even stranger. I just saw something. There's a part of Arizona, James. I was watching I forget what it was and who put it together, but it was resonating about people who just seemed to vanish, like within a few feet of other people.
Mhm.
Oh, you know what it was? It was connected to missing 411, and so
Yeah.
there was kind of an offshoot of it. And this guy was closer than the hiker was to this other gentleman. He saw him go down in a ravine, which was probably less than a few yards, and he didn't come back up the other side and never found. No
Mhm.
holes, no caves, just gone, absolutely gone.
Yeah.
And and like you said, it's the strangest damn thing. So it's did they go through a portal and come out on the other side at a different time? Who knows, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
But even in that area too, you guys have so many sightings and prints of Bigfoot. Has there been anything new along those lines this year?
Well, we continue to get a series of really, I don't know, like sort of one-off cryptids. And
Right.
so, I don't know if we talked about this the last time I was on, but there's like the big ones. Like we get a lot of Sasquatch reports. We get a lot of reports of that Klickitat ape cat. We're well over 90 reports at this time about the cat. And for your listeners who don't know, the Klickitat ape cat is, we've had close to 90 reports of an enormous Black Panther creature prowling around the gorge area. Of the
And
90 reports, everyone describes a very muscular black cat
right.
with a long black tail, black fur. We know that it's not indigenous because there are no such thing as black cougars up here. And the only big black cat in North America is the jaguar, but its range ends 1,000 miles south of here in southern New Mexico and Arizona, that area.
Yeah, we did
And,
talk about that because you were. I
yeah.
think the thought was it was related to the Cold War stuff they were doing at
Mhm.
Hanford.
Yep.
Wasn't that what you were talking about?
Yeah, exactly. And so of these reports, about half of them say the creature is enormous in size, about 4 or 5 feet tall at the shoulder. We just got a report
Jesus.
in 3 weeks ago. A guy was driving home after visiting Mount St. Helens, and the cat jumped into the middle of the road, and then it looked at him, and then it leapt over the guard railing and down a hill. And he described it as being as tall as his car, and he was driving a Honda Civic, so that's 4.5 feet tall right there.
Yeah.
So an enormous cat we get, and then just to finish that thought, a handful of the sightings say that the creature has a face that looks like a monkey, or at least a flattened snout that's got human-like features. And so that's one of those, so Bigfoot, the ape cat, we get a lot of reports about, tons of reports of glowing orbs, tons of reports of UFOs. But we also get these, like I said, one-off cryptids. Just, was it 10 days ago, a woman wrote to me saying that she is back in the early 90s, and her family was driving up one of the dirt roads near town in the gorge called Lyle.
Right.
And she saw this creature, a quadruped, 4 legs, with long white fur, basically charge their car. They come up out of a ditch and charge their car, and then it kept pace with their car for about 50 yards, and then it sort of faded off and went back into the forest. She said that it had no discernible head, and she really couldn't make out what it looked like, in terms of a face. It was this large, like bigger than a cow kind of a thing, and long, white, shaggy fur. And so she, had held on to that story for close to 3 decades before sharing it with us at the store through our website, Paranormal Reporting Program, margiesoutdoorstore.com, if your listeners are interested.
Yeah.
So that's like, we get stories like that. We got a story of actually my daughter. We were 4-wheel driving just a quarter mile from the house, and we had to pull over to let another car pass. And she looked out the window and said, "Oh, there's a big snake out there, Dad. There's a big snake out there. It's about 3 feet long, a huge, brownish yellow snake with frills on the side of its head that are red that fade to yellow." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." her 9-year-old eyes, she was just seeing a snake and was excited about that. She didn't know that there are no frilled snakes in North America. There are no frilled lizards in North America. In fact, I don't know that there are any frilled lizards anywhere in the world recognized by science. So again, it's a one-off report. You can't put too much stock into it.
I'm going to tell you what, James, you got Dr. Maru operating in your area. Anybody know what that is, listeners? Okay, the island of Dr.
Maru.
Oh my
God!
I'm
making chimeras.
I'm actually looking at one of James's old guest appearances right now on FKN Clips on YouTube, talking about the Klickitat ape cat, Hanford nuclear chimeras, Columbia River Gorge cryptids.
Yeah. We had another report of a woman, her son, her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's brother that were up in the Shadow Mount Adams. They encountered a pack of whistling creatures. These appeared to be dog-like, but they definitely weren't dogs. They were hairless, and about 3 feet tall at the shoulder. And they seem to be bounding around and communicating with each other. And then at sunrise, they seem to be fearful of light and they fled. Another person claims to have seen a creature that was standing by the side of the road. It was about 2.5 feet tall, thin humanoid with a head that looked like a praying mantis. And so another person, 2 girls, very close to that area where the individual saw the praying mantis head humanoid, they claim to have seen this enormous 20-foot tall hairy creature, which they were adamant was not a Bigfoot, and it was sort of coming down the road at them, but appeared to be glitching, I guess that's the description that you gave.
Like we're all in a matrix, yeah.
And so again, we hear these stories like this where there are these creatures that don't seem to fit in any kind of standard popular category,
right?
And I asked them, what's going on here? Are we some type of crossroads? Are we at some type of place where things wander in and out? I think
maybe like you said, maybe you're just in that area where it's opening your perception because of different. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just this, the veil is thin and you guys are perceiving all these other creatures that are existing in maybe different parallels alongside of us. Who knows? Yeah. I don't
know. We just 2 weekends ago, we put out a call. Is anyone interested in a paranormal group here in the Gorge? And 45 people showed up.
Wow.
And and so and a lot of people wrote to me and said that they wished that they could come, but they had other obligations.
Right.
And we as a community are trying to come up with different theories about what's going on. Our brains have got magnetite crystals in them. So basically in our hippocampus and temporal lobes, they've measured 5 million magnetite crystal grains per gram of brain matter. And magnetite is obviously a substance which is magnetically active. And the research that's coming out now says that it looks like this magnetite may be responsible for some creatures having natural navigation abilities, like those birds and things like that, and butterflies that migrate thousands of miles and things like that. Yeah. That there's a mechanical mechanism through these magnetite crystals that is actually what they're using to navigate. But a guy named Dr. Michael Persinger in the 80s and 90s, he was a professor at Laurentide University in Ontario, Canada. He studied what happened when you put magnetic fields around a human brain. Mm-hmm. And he was able to do a whole host of paranormal-like experiences. Right. So people often would, have a sense presence or a number of other things like that. So it's clear that magnetic fields influence human perception.
Absolutely. I'm glad you touched on that. Absolutely. I've been telling people for even before I met Drew, for many years, that the EPA still stands on a report that's based directly on that. This is why they were moving people away from power lines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no more farms, no more houses, because you know, that was causing people to hallucinate, rashes, just a host of things on soft tissue, all based on the high magnetic, you know, field.
Electromagnetic field. Yeah.
Correct. And you know, and then they still stand by it. But then, you know, when you wanted to sue cell phone people who were with the first cell phones causing tumors, they denied it. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, because you guys didn't see it through and you didn't make it safe, you know. So I think you're absolutely right. And that adds to a lot of this too. You know, I in my interview process, when I talk to individuals, I run them through that gambit just to see, you know, just to make sure. I study, like if I'm in a house or something, I study and make sure that we don't have, you know, any sort of magnetic field in there that's operating against the occupants, especially a fear cage or something like that that's happened because people, you know, when people build houses or apartments, they're absolutely crap when they do that at times, whether it passes, you know, a standard or not. And I didn't mean to get off on a tangent there, but it's great that you brought that up, because I think, you know, with all the cell phone signals and satellite and everything that's going on around us every day, just think of it on different levels or even lower REMs that may, like you said, may affect those crystallins in our brain, and, you know, high magnetism, which is why people get, you know, when you encounter those when you're flying an airplane, not just does it affect the airplane, sometimes people go wonky too, and they don't know up from down, or, you know, because it messes with your head, right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it be the same thing out in an area, like you said, around you guys out there? And
Yeah.
you got
And so,
water and everything else going on, so who knows?
yeah, you know, and so you have to ask yourself, okay, is this inducing a localized hallucination in one person's brain? Like, that's a legitimate line of query.
It is.
But we have, you know, physical evidence. So we've got photographs of orbs. We've got photographs of seeming UFOs. We've got hair samples. We've got footprints. And we have co-witnessed events like that UFO laser, sheet laser that I talked about earlier in the interview.
Yeah.
9 people witnessed that event. And so you really can't say that this is a personal hallucination. Like there's something being
that was the
misfiring
skeptics
in your personal brain.
Those are the skeptics. So, they were running around telling everybody's having a mass hysteria, and you're confusing the next person. And I'm just thinking, well, not on a picture or a video.
Yeah,
what like
like hallucinations don't show up on photographs.
Yeah.
So then you have to ask yourself, well, what's really going on there? And so think about like a radio station, and you've got your radio station tuned to classical music, right? So you got the classical music station going on. And then you make one tiny adjustment to your electromagnetic receiver, and suddenly, instead of classical music, you're perceiving rock and roll music, or you make another adjustment and you're perceiving country music. Now, that rock and roll signal and that country music signal is always present. It's just you're not tuned to seeing it or to hearing it, right? Yep. And so every other bit of your environment is the same. You're in the same physical, you can see everything, you know, like you're standing next to a waterfall or whatever it is. But just by adjusting that one receiving apparatus, your perception of reality changes dramatically. One is classical music, one is rock and roll music, adjust it again, and you're hearing country music. And what I think is happening out here in the gorge is that because we have such a complex and nuanced electromagnetic environment, people's tuners are more apt to get shifted. And if you think about like everyday life being the classical musical station, everyone hears classical music, and then your tuner gets changed and you're hearing rock and roll music. Then you go tell your friends, hey, come over here. I'm hearing rock and roll music, or I'm seeing Sasquatch, or I'm seeing UFO. And they get there and all they hear is classical music. And they say, you're full of crap. There's nothing here that's special.
Right.
And it's not because the special thing isn't there. It's because the witnesses are not properly tuned to that particular experience.
Now,
you're
the,
resonating with something that it's like, some people hear the hum
Mhm.
and some people don't.
Yeah.
now
Isn't it
the,
weird?
the magnetite crystals that everyone has in their brain, is that also the reason that a lot of people, when they're like in a very quiet environment, laying in bed at night, whatever it might be, that they hear music or they hear people talking
You
because
know,
the electromagnetic frequency that our brain is running on, you know, I've done it. I've laid in bed at night and actually heard very, very, very faint music and got up and walked through my house to make sure somebody didn't leave a TV or radio or something on.
I know
Then I go
exactly what
back
you're
to
talking
bed
about.
and I
Yeah.
wondered about that, since I mean a crystal in any
Mhm.
form does have its own power source, which is why a lot of radios won't work without a crystal in it.
Mhm.
CBs included back in the day, and when you start talking about that, it's like, my God, that actually really makes sense. But then, if that's the case, why can't modern science agree on that? If you go to your psychologist, you say, "I'm hearing shit at night," then they want to sit down, like make you lay on the couch, start taking notes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just kind of it kind of opens like several different. Uh, we just had a viewer
Would you
when my electric fan runs. I hear mumbled voice-like sounds. I'm
Mhm.
I'm I'm with you, Nancy. I hear it too because our fan is always on low. So
Mhm.
yeah, I hear it too.
I got
Yeah.
a question for you, James, too. I mean, would you agree with me that when you're out in an environment like that and in nature, I mean, you're in a lot of nature compared to our nature, but I've been into a lot of nature up here in Michigan. There's vast areas that I've been into where I'm miles from any technology. And I guess what I'm asking you, would you agree that there's a different resonance and there's a different feeling when you're out there? It's not just because you're shut off from, what I mean, from
Mhm.
civilization. It's almost like you're better in tune,
Yeah.
and you feel more grounded, and then therefore your perception's a little higher.
Yeah, that's why, for my whole life I've been attracted to these outdoor endeavors, whether it
Right,
be soldiering
right.
or, search and rescue and those kind of things. I really enjoy that. Um, and there is a sense, like I said, drive 25 minutes to the gorge every day, and it's awe-inspiring.
Right.
Like you can say, well, you're just looking at these beautiful rock formations and the waterfalls and the forests and everything in the mountains. But I think there's more to it than that. I think that there's something actually changing on levels that we don't normally think about.
Right.
And I think it's, these magnetic fields. And, those magnetic fields can be influenced by solar weather. The sun is always
Absolutely. Yep.
variable in what it's outputting, and it changes dramatically the Earth's magnetosphere. And so, whether it's a combination of, the unique electromagnetic environment here in the gorge, coupled with certain solar weather conditions, coupled even with what you may have eaten that day, maybe, who knows, potassium might
Yep.
have some kind of influence on it. And if you've eaten a banana that morning and the solar wind is high and you're in the right spot, like all of those factors come into play. There's another element, and it's sort of related to this question about being in the city or being in a more natural environment. So with all of the legalization of cannabis, there's been a lot more scientific attention paid to what's going on with that. And what they're finding is it's not just the THC in cannabis that causes people's experiences. There's also these things called terpenes. And terpenes are natural plant chemicals originally
Right.
developed to fight off insects and stuff like that. But it's the terpene mix that can dramatically influence your experience on cannabis. And so there are like easy things to think about, like the smell of pine, that's a terpene. The smell of fresh cut grass, another terpene. the citrus smell, another terpene.
Right.
And so every environment that you walk into has got like the natural plant life of that area is emitting its terpenes. And for instance, in the western half of the gorge, you've got all of the Pacific Northwest rainforest terpenes coming out of the Douglas firs and things like that. On the desert side, it's a different set of a chemical soup that you're walking in. And these things can have a dramatic effect on your mood and everything else. And so,
Right.
The very environment that you're in is adjusting your, it's chemically influencing your experience of the world. And when you get into a city, there are no terpenes there. Like there's no plant life there to speak of, not in the volumes you see in a natural environment. And so you've got this absence of terpenes. And what does that do to a person? And it makes you wonder if, like in the South, there's a particular mode, like people from the South are a certain way and people from Texas are another way and people from the Northwest are another way. It may very well have to do with the terpene soup that they're living in. And, like when you go back home after being away for some time, like there's a feeling about being home.
Right.
And part of that is that chemical soup that you're breathing in every moment, and it's impacting your perception and experience of reality. And so I think all of those things, like you really can't isolate it and say it's this one thing or it's another thing. It's like these things working in concert, a cohort effect, which is inducing people to have experiences that people normally don't have. I want to be clear that the experiences, it's not that those experiences aren't real. They're just not available on the channel normal that we sort of all settled into as what quote unquote reality is.
Yeah. And you touched on the sun, and I remember reading a report several years ago, and we brought it up on last week's show, because last week's guest, he's Afterlife with the pets, and he's also a meteorologist, and he talked about, certain things in weather and atmosphere affecting the paranormal. And I've had paranormal people argue with me about that no, it doesn't. Well, and they tried to tell me that they studied it, and it's like, well, you didn't study it. I've read several reports over the years and a theory over the years, and one of them made a lot of sense to me. And I kind of put it to test in such a manner that I went out in winter and I did more paranormal investigating in cemeteries and stuff outside and even indoors during winter months, like, fall and winter months, because we know that when we shift on our axis and, winter and start approaching, the Van Allen radiation belt really pummels the hell out of us.
Mm-hmm.
And in such a fashion that not only is it affecting the ions either positively or negatively, which works in favor of both of our areas of paranormal, the spirit aspect, it generally seemed to rear up a lot of other things as well. And, with the the UFO and the UAPs and the Bigfoots and some of those other things that are going on, it seems to be there's a lot of things happening all at once around him, and it seems almost connected, which is the strangest thing. But I do believe, as you said, nature and weather and all that lines up sometimes, and it lines up just right. And then I might get an EVP, a recording or something, and it may not even be a resonance of the past. I'm gonna step into this. I might even be picking up on time travel and getting something that's actually happening in 1927. But yet here it's 2024. And how would I ever prove it? I can't. But some of it seems really odd and strange. That we encounter. And as far as you talking about the cryptid, with the thing that looked like a dog type of thing that stood up and, had a flat face. One of our friends, Bob Penny, he's in a book called, I think, Weird Michigan or Strange Michigan. I think it's Weird Michigan. And I think Linda Howe or the other lady, I'm having a brain fart, wrote it because she started talking about the dog man. And Bob had an experience right here a couple miles away from me with something that you just described tonight. And I told Bob about you describing that before. how it stood up and it was eating some sort of animal, and it looked at him and then ran off into a swampy river area, took off. But he said when it stood up, it was just as tall as their car.
Yeah.
And there's no raccoons running around out here I know of that are that tall. So, what are you supposed to think, right?
And it's easy to think, okay, how is this affecting us? And is it changing our perception, our ability to see these non-channel normal type things? But it may be a two-way street where those beings are being affected as well. And
by us,
so it's
right?
like they're seeing us, and they don't normally see us. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole two-way street thing that I think could be going on as well.
That's funny because I think maybe that's what the guy who did the shirt, a Bigfoot, where Bigfoot went back to the other, it leads on the shirt. It says that he saw us and he told all the other Bigfoots and they didn't believe him either.
Yep, exactly.
They may be like, what the hell is that thing? What are they doing? Who knows?
Well,
you're right.
I will tell you, this whole project, which really for me started in earnest a little over 2 years ago when we started doing the reports in the store. It's just been, I can't tell you how joyful. What a wonderful experience is. Like if you have a curious mind and you're willing to recognize that mainstream science has its own dogmas and has its own paradigms that prevents it from taking these things seriously. You could get grumpy about that, or you could say, oh, wow, this is awesome. That means that we have an open field to do the kind of research that is compelling to us. We're not beholden to academic groups or tenure or funding or those kind of things. It's sort of like, back in the Victorian era, there was a ton of citizen scientists who were discovering dinosaur fossils, or Benjamin Franklin was doing experiments with electricity, which at the time was just this weird magical sorcerous power source that no one understood. And, science has sort of turned its nose up at it, said it's not real, we don't believe in it. They've got problems with materialism. Materialism has been in trouble since the 1920s. In the last 10 years, the things that have been discovered, like materialism, is just a dead end as a world model.
Yeah.
But the scientific community, it's going to take a while to process that and, get out from under that. But in the meantime, it means that citizen scientists have like this huge, vast field, and it's unfettered. And we can go in and do interesting research, follow our noses, and really have, like for me, I'm having the time of my life. I can't tell you how joyful and how thankful I am.
Yeah.
That we're kind of at the center of our little corner of the world and all the amazing things that are happening here that don't fit into current models of reality. It's a wonderful time to be involved.
Exactly. And you're right. And it's there was a book put out a few years ago that George Norrie had the guys on, and it was nice to hear you on with George, by the way, because I just happened to tune in that night, and there you were. I'm like, hey, he was just on our show. I know that guy. So it was really cool. So he had some guys on, which was, about paranormal in the United States. And basically what they were, saying to people is like, well, it's not just a bunch of crazy, people running around, because there are, not crazy, but there are people running around that they're not really doing any sort of research or anything that's tangible that you could probably lay up, like you said, you could lay up against some other reports and say, well, wow, they did some of their homework, and this stuff is going on. And I'd like to claim that we've done that. I have a filing cabinet to prove it. Drew knows how I go to an extreme. I just don't jump to conclusions. But as much as I respect, Mr. Tyson and a few other people who are physicists, there's a lot of times they open my eyes because they believe in one thing that you wouldn't think they believe in, but then they say some very closed-end things, according to our physics and our science and our math, that, if there was anything out beyond that, you'd think that we would know, and it can't exist. Well, this is what you were saying 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years ago.
Yeah.
If I were to tell a guy in the 1600s that, hey, guess what, man? We're going to be able to watch each other from across the sea on this tiny little box.
It's sorcery,
witchcraft, or you're insane. Let's put him in a house and take part of his brain out. So, it's the thing of, like you said, look at Copernicus, all these other people that were shunned because, like, I think I'm going to put all of us in that wheelbarrow. We were asking questions and we were coming up with explanations for the unknown. And I think, like you said, everyday citizen science people should consistently do what they're doing and continue to report this stuff, because unfortunately there's a portion of science that has become its own religion. As you said, they're so worried about tenure and other things going on. It used to be, like you said, that you were supposed to go out there and look for these new things, not shut them down.
Intellectual curiosity. I mean,
correct.
If you think about it,
go ahead.
Formal science is always going to be the last to know. Like the process is field reports, research, discussion. And then you've got a whole debate about, other people's theories, and you're clashing with that. And then you got to, oftentimes in science, what the only way a new idea gets recognized as valid is that its detractors literally die.
Right.
And, that's what happened to out here in the Columbia River Gorge. We've got the Great Missoula floods. And, the geologists that came out here and looked at this stuff back in the 1920s said there was a huge flood here. There were floodwaters that were 800 feet deep. And his name was J. Harlan Bretz.
Yep.
And the U.S. Geological Society mercilessly ruined his career. They humiliated him. They told him, if you can't give us a source of the water, it couldn't have possibly happened. And he said, well, I don't know where the water came from, but here's the freaking evidence. And there's no other way you get these kind of features without this volume of water. And when so he presents these ideas, he gets ridiculed, he gets mocked, he gets his funding pulled, he gets all kinds of hassles. He goes on to other things, and then in his 90s, he gets awarded the Penrose Medal, which is the U.S. Geological Society's highest award, because the evidence was so overwhelming and so clear. And all of his detractors, all of those people that were putting him through the ringer, literally died off. And it was only after those giant egos were no longer there, putting a pie in his face every day he tried to talk, that he finally was recognized for, you saw the data, you came to a logical conclusion by it, you weren't fettered by the paradigms or the dogma of your scientific community, the geological community. And it turns out that he advanced that science and gave us data about how the world works that we would have never had if he had just given up and not tried to present it, and had listened to the detractors and had shrunk in the face of the onslaught of criticism.
Makes me think of two things. Isn't that something? It's look at over in Egypt, with the Sphinx, and then they're like, hey, you have the same type of people like him who are telling them like, well, these are watermarks that are on this thing was underwater. And
but I have a theory, and my theory is correct.
They're like, no,
it doesn't fit the theory. It can't be real.
And so some of the other powers there to be, start shutting it down, and they've proven it. And the same thing with, portions of the Grand Canyon. How many years did that go until somebody realized you could look at layers that was a huge giant river gorge, very deep, and it tore all of that out of there. And we won't even get into the other weirdness that happened down there about the Smithsonian and them hiding and lying. But it's you're right. It's the craziest thing. And I think you are in such a very cool, like a hotbed, like a central location to do the things that you're doing. And I just can't imagine why they haven't done a TV show with you yet. It's the craziest
it's funny
thing.
You mention that. I've had a couple of producers come talk to to me.
Really?
They're a squirrely bunch. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One guy wanted me to sign a paper that said that waive my right to legal action forever related to the show. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, are you crazy? I'm running, 3 businesses down here. I'm not going to waive the right to do legal action. And so there's some other folks that are much more reputable. But yeah, you got to be careful. But it'd be really fun, I think, to have a show and let people see some of the stuff firsthand and hear some of these accounts. I wish that I had more time to be able to put up more videos and that kind of stuff, but we would love to have a high quality, reputable, ethical producer come in and chat with us. Because there's some weeks, like 2 weeks ago, we had 10 reports in a week. That's more than one a day, and sometimes it just goes off. It's really amazing and super fun. Super
that's
fun.
The thing is trying to find somebody that's willing to come out there, a film student or somebody that's willing to work on YouTube projects with you. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? You have so much to share. Before we go here, I want you to remind everybody where they can find you.
Sure. So my name is James, and Margie's Outdoor Store is located in the Columbia River Gorge. We're in the tiny, tiny town of Bingen, Washington, which is right across the river from the town of Hood River. My website is margiesoutdoorstore.com, and you can go there to file a paranormal report or take a look at some of the creatures we got crawling around out here. We just started posting regularly the reports that we're getting on our Facebook page. So Margie's Outdoor Store on Facebook. We're getting some stuff up on our Instagram page. Again, Margie's Outdoor Store on Instagram. And we are also starting to put stuff up on YouTube as well.
Didn't I see that you, I came across it on something. Didn't you just do a hero room?
Oh, yeah. We, so I'm looking at those swords behind you. So, I have spent many years in the nerd industry, and I'm a big fan of all that kind of stuff. So we built a special room in the back of our store. It sort of looks like a steampunk, like Captain Nemo's captain's chambers,
right?
But it is filled with the most awesome props and weapons and gear and armor from the coolest action movies in video games. So we've got the swords from the Lord of the Rings. We've got Indiana Jones's whip, his hat, his idol. We've got lightsabers. We've got Master Chief helmet. We've got the Mandalorian helmet, Iron Man's helmet and his heart and his gauntlet. There's Harry Potter's wands. There's it's just, we even have the shaving cream can from Jurassic Park that Ned used to smuggle out the
embryos. The embryos, yeah.
And you got Minecraft potion bottles and just a whole host of really cool, fun things. There's Jack Sparrow's sword from Pirates of the Caribbean. We've got the Leviathan axe from the God of War video game series, and some anime fans may know Attack on Titan and the cool omnidirectional gear swords they have. So it was a delight. It took me 3 months to build and stock, and we've got a soft open right now, so people are not in there, and we're gonna do a grand opening on the 13th of April.
You're gonna have to get yourself some Ghostbuster gear in there.
Oh, we have a proton pack in there, in fact.
Oh my God, do you really?
Yep.
Oh, he's one step ahead of me.
Oh man.
So yeah, it's really fun. It's awesome stuff.
If I move, do you see that? There's one back
there.
there.
You go. Yep.
Yeah, I got the suit and all that crap.
Oh, nice. I love it.
We're gonna get Drew another one.
Yep. Everybody needs one.
Everybody needs.
Well, I've got one of the old ones, but my wife doesn't see an expenditure of $200 for a pack. I'm only going to wear 6 or 7 times a year.
Well, I tell you what, because I could justify it as a business expense, I sort of did an end run around the wife approval process, and so.
Well, and see, I told my wife if I get my pizza place opened up, I'm going to call it Paranormal Pizza, and I'll use the proton pack as a tax write-off.
Isn't that funny?
That's the deal.
My wife was talking my people into opening a coffee shop like that. We were going to call it Encounters.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That's still on the drawing board. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but James, I want to thank you for coming back and being with us again.
My pleasure.
Sorry your camera went out, but It's always fun to talk to you. And as I said, I've been keeping a little bit of an eye on what's happening out there. I read up on your stuff, and it's just great to have you come back and be with us.
Yeah. And again, like we're really focusing on trying to get more data out there. So keep an eye on our social channels. And in a few days, maybe a week or so, we'll start putting up pictures of the Heroes Den so people can see what I'm talking about. But it's really cool.
Absolutely.
Very
so everybody,
cool. Very cool.
Oh, and I should say, we are,
go ahead.
Now that the Heroes Den has got a bow on it, I am redesigning our paranormal section in the store. So we're calling it the Gorge Paranormal Info Center. And just today, I cut out our 11-foot tall Sasquatch model.
Oh boy!
So I still got to cover it with fur, but it is. We've had reports of squatches being as tall as 14 feet here in the gorge, and to stand in front of a giant furry 11-foot tall thing, it humbles you. I'll tell you what.
Of course, my God,
quite something. And so in our info center, we've also got our big map of the gorge with the pins in it of all the different spots where we've had sightings reported. And so, yeah, it's like I said, it's a real joy to have a successful enough business that we've got enough to do these fun things and ways to help people understand what people are experiencing out there.
Yeah, man, thank you for sharing that with us. And
yeah,
you guys know where to go. You know where to go. That's margiesoutdoor.com.
Yep, margiesoutdoor.com, margiesoutdoorstore.com. They both work.
Correct. All right, very cool. And you got to get one of these for your nerd store.
Danger, Will Robinson.
This is Robbie from Forbidden Planet.
Oh, that's right, Robbie from Forbidden Planet.
But the same man who designed this robot also did the B9 philosophy.
That's such a classic shape for a robot. It really is.
Oh yeah,
I love it. That's awesome.
Definitely. Danny, it's funny you brought him up. I just watched a video, I think last week, where they had pulled that poor little guy out of scrap.
Yeah.
And started rebuilding him.
Yep. He was one of the few that they couldn't track him down, but same with the Lost in Space robot. They finally have the original. And so that's it. They found all sorts of things from our childhood that they've rediscovered. And there's still a Jupiter 2 missing, though. There were 12 of them. And the one that they used for initial shots, that they put on the wires to crash into the desert, they can't find it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, somebody stole it off the lot, and it's worth about $1.something million. Craziness.
Probably in some storage shed somewhere.
Yeah. It's probably at your place, right? All right, everybody. This has been Paranormal Notebook. We've had James Szubski. Szubski.
There you go.
Bowser. I don't know.
Don't worry about it.
Szubski. I don't want to butcher your name. It's Szubski. And he's told us all about all the strangeness now out there. Get your butt out there and go out west.
There you go.
It's a very cool place. I've only driven through just the tip of the state once, and I was half asleep, so I don't remember it. But very high strangeness going on. I'd like to thank our sponsor, which is Henderson Castle, hendersoncastle.com. They're right here in downtown Kalamazoo. It's an $18.95 bed and breakfast, and you can stay there. You can, next time you're in Kalamazoo, book a stay. It's not the Hilton. It's an $18.95 bed and breakfast, all right? And once a month, you can come see yours truly. I do the haunted dinner tour, and I also have begun hosting tiny murder mysteries. So we can also book those. And we'd also like to thank Gun Barrel Coffee out of Batavia, Illinois. Great guys, great coffee, great cause. It's veteran owned, 4 generations of roasters. And if you use this code GBC10, when you order your first order from gunbarrelcoffee.com, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. And they've got anything from light to medium to dark. They also have a CBD mixture. And as I tell everybody, I didn't read the directions when they sent me a sample. And you're supposed to go half and half with it, okay? So I slept the best I ever slept in my life after I had that cup of coffee. But it is good for pain and what ails you. So everybody, thank you. You all have a good night, and it doesn't cost any of us to be kind to one another. It's
There you
free.
go.
It's free, man. Just share a smile and a handshake, whether you're on opposite sides of the fence or not. You'll make it a better world. Drew, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right. James, you take care. Have a great weekend, and we will see everybody on the flip side.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.